The galaxy was vast, cold, and unforgiving. Among the billions of stars, Earth stood as a small blue dot, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. For centuries, humanity had looked up at the night sky with wonder and dreams of exploration. But when they finally reached the stars, reality hit hard. They were not alone. And worse, they were weak. Humanity's first steps into space were clumsy, desperate, and filled with mistakes. Their ships were slow, their weapons outdated, and their technology laughable compared to the mighty empires that ruled the galaxy. The hegemony, a race of towering beings with metallic exoskeletons, watched humanity's feeble attempts to survive in space with disdain. To them, humans were nothing more than ants, small, fragile, and easily crushed. But ants could bite too if provoked enough. That lesson would come later. For now, humanity needed help. When Earth's government sent out their first diplomatic envoys, they were met with laughter or silence. No one cared about the tiny newcomers struggling to keep their foothold among the stars. It wasn't until they stepped forward that humanity found an answer to its prayers, or so they thought. They offered humanity a deal: advanced technology, terraforming tools, and military protection in exchange for a loan. Desperate to secure their place in the galaxy, humanity agreed without fully understanding what they were signing. What started as a lifeline soon became a noose around their necks. The loan came with terms so steep, so suffocating, that humanity barely had time to catch its breath before the debt began spiraling out of control. Centuries passed. Humanity grew stronger, spreading across dozens of star systems. But every colony, every planet they settled bore the mark of the. Payments were extracted ruthlessly, often through violence or intimidation. Entire worlds were seized as collateral when payments fell short. Millions of humans lived under oppressive rule, forced to work in mines or factories owned by the. Resistance movements sprang up here and there, but they were quickly crushed. Hope seemed like a distant memory. Commander sat in her quarters aboard the Eclipse, a battered warship that served as the flagship of humanity's dwindling resistance forces. She stared at the holo display hovering above her desk, showing the latest figures from the accountants. The numbers were staggering, almost incomprehensible. Humanity owed trillions upon trillions of credits, a sum so large it might as well have been infinite. Sighed and leaned back in her chair. Her dark hair was tied into a tight bun and lines of exhaustion marked her face. At 38, she was younger than most commanders, but years of fighting had aged her prematurely. Still, she refused to give up. Not yet. There had to be a way out of this mess. There had to be. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she said, straightening up. The door slid open, revealing Dr. Isaac Teller. He was a wiry man in his 50s, with glasses perched on his nose and a data pad clutched tightly in his hands. His lab coat was stained with coffee spills, and his eyes darted nervously behind thick lenses. Despite his unkempt appearance, Isaac was one of the people new, and right now, he looked like he'd just seen a ghost. "You need to see this," he said, holding out the data pad. Took it and scanned the contents. As she read, her brow furrowed deeper and deeper. Finally, she looked up at him. "Are you sure about this?" Isaac nodded vigorously. "I double-checked everything. The original loan agreement, it's a fraud. They never intended to let us pay it off. They designed it to grow indefinitely, trapping us in debt forever." Felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just bad news, it was catastrophic. If true, it meant humanity's struggles weren't due to incompetence or bad luck. They were deliberate. They had planned this from the start, using economics as a weapon to enslave an entire species. "We can't prove it," said after a moment. "Even if we could, who would believe us? The other races won't care. They've ignored us for centuries." "That's why we need to act," Isaac insisted. "We settle the debt, all of it, in one go." Raised an eyebrow. "With what? We don't have the resources." Isaac hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There's a theory, something I've been working on, quantum mining. If we can extract antimatter cores from black holes, we'll have more energy than anyone in the galaxy, enough to pay off the debt, and maybe even tip the scales in our favor. Studied him carefully. Isaac was brilliant, but his ideas often bordered on madness. Antimatter extraction from black holes. It sounded impossible, yet she couldn't dismiss it outright. Humanity had survived this long by taking risks. Maybe this was the risk they needed to take. "Do you think it can work?" she asked. "I think it's our only shot," Isaac replied. "But it's dangerous. Pushing tech too far, too fast, things could go wrong, really wrong." Stood up, packing the room. She knew the stakes. Failure meant annihilation. Success, however, could change everything. For the first time in decades, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. "All right," she said finally. "Let's do it. Start assembling a team. We'll need engineers, physicists, anyone who can make this happen, and keep it quiet, if they find out." "They'll crush us," Isaac finished grimly. Nodded, "Exactly, so let's make sure they don't." As Isaac left the room, returned to the holo display. She stared at the numbers again, but this time they didn't seem quite so overwhelming. Humanity had been pushed to the brink before, and somehow they always managed to claw their way back. This time wouldn't be any different. Little did she know they were already watching. Overseer, a high-ranking official in the hegemony, had grown suspicious of increased activity in human-controlled space. He dispatched probes and spies to investigate, determined to squash any rebellion before it gained momentum. Was known for his efficiency and his cruelty. He viewed humans as little more than pests, unworthy of mercy. For now, though, humanity still had the element of surprise. And Isaac's plan was risky, reckless even, but it represented a chance, a slim, fragile chance to break free from the chains binding them. The road ahead would be brutal, paved with sacrifice and loss, but if they succeeded, the galaxy itself would tremble. And perhaps, just perhaps, humanity would finally stand tall among the stars, not as victims but as victors. Part 2. The plan was insane. That much was clear from the start. Extracting antimatter cores from black holes sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, not a practical solution to humanity's problems. Yet here they were, gathered in a dimly lit conference room aboard the Eclipse, hashing out the details. Commander stood at the head of the table, her arms crossed as she listened to the heated debate unfolding before her. Around her sat scientists, engineers, strategists, and soldiers, all hand-picked for their brilliance or bravery. Some argued passionately in favor of the plan, while others voiced concerns that bordered on outright panic. "It's too risky," said Captain Hale, a grizzled veteran with scars crisscrossing his face. "If we fail, they will wipe us out, and even if we succeed, they'll see it as an act of war." "We're already at war," shot back Dr. Isaac Teller, his voice sharp despite the tremor beneath it. "Every day we delay, more humans die under rule. This is our chance to fight back, not with guns but with ingenuity." Held up a hand, silencing both men. "Enough," she said firmly. Her tone left no room for argument. "We don't have the luxury of caution. If we do nothing, we lose everything. So let's focus on how we can make this work." She turned to the holographic display hovering above the center of the table. It showed a swirling black hole surrounded by streams of glowing matter being pulled into its abyss. Next to it was a schematic of the experimental quantum mining device Isaac had designed, a massive machine capable of stabilizing and extracting tiny fragments of antimatter from the chaos. "Assuming we build this thing," began, addressing the group, "how long will it take to gather enough antimatter to pay off the debt?" Isaac adjusted his glasses nervously. "It depends on several factors: stability of the equipment, proximity to the black hole, energy consumption rates. But my best estimate, 6 months, maybe less if we push hard." 6 months. The timeline sent a ripple of unease through the room. 6 months meant 6 months of secrecy, 6 months of avoiding detection by the ever-watchful. One slip-up, one intercepted transmission, and the entire operation would collapse. "What about defense?" asked Lieutenant Sarah, a young officer who had earned her stripes through sheer determination. "Even if we keep the project hidden, they won't just sit back and wait. They'll attack sooner or later." Nodded grimly. "That's why we prepare for both scenarios. Half of you will focus on building the mining rig. The rest will fortify our defenses and train for combat. We need to be ready for anything." As the meeting broke up, stayed behind, staring at the hollow display once everyone else had left. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Every decision she made could mean life or death for billions of people. Was she leading them towards salvation or disaster? Meanwhile, deep within controlled territory, Overseer reviewed reports from his spies embedded among human colonies. His segmented body clicked softly as he moved, his metallic exoskeleton glinting under the harsh artificial light of his command chamber. Was not known for patience, and the recent surge in human activity had piqued his interest and his suspicion. "These patterns are unusual," he rasped, addressing his subordinate, a smaller named. "Increased resource allocation, unauthorized ship movements. What are they planning?" Hesitated, knowing better than to speculate without evidence. "Perhaps it is merely routine expansion, Overseer. Humans are unpredictable creatures." His mandibles twitched in irritation. "Humans are predictable when cornered. They scheme, they plot, they resist. Something is happening, and I intend to find out what." He issued orders swiftly, dispatching additional surveillance drones to monitor human operations. At the same time, he authorized covert raids on suspected rebel strongholds, hopping to uncover clues. Didn't care about collateral damage. Fear was a tool he wielded expertly. If humans thought themselves clever, he would remind them of their place, with violence if necessary. Back on the Eclipse, preparations were. Engineers worked tirelessly to assemble the quantum mining rig, welding together massive components in zero gravity. Scientists ran endless simulations, tweaking equations and testing materials to ensure the device could withstand the immense forces near a black hole. Soldiers drilled relentlessly, honing their skills for the inevitable confrontation with the. Despite the urgency, tensions simmered below the surface. Not everyone believed the plan would succeed. Some whispered about mutiny, questioning whether and Isaac were leading them to ruin. Others clung to hope, desperate for any chance to break free from this grip. One evening, found herself alone in the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. The vastness of space always reminded her of how small humanity truly was, and yet how resilient. She thought about Earth, now little more than a distant memory for most people. Would future generations remember it, or would it fade into obscurity, just another forgotten world? "You look troubled," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Isaac standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her with a sheepish smile. "I figured you could use a break." Accepted the cup gratefully. "Thanks, I needed this." They stood side by side in silence for a moment, sipping their drinks and watching the stars. Finally, Isaac spoke. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing? If maybe we should just give up?" Shook her head. "No, giving up isn't an option. Not anymore. We've spent centuries bending to this will. It's time we stood up for ourselves, for all the people who suffered because of their greed." Isaac sighed. "I know, it's just, sometimes I think about all the lives at stake if we fail." "We won't fail," interrupted, her voice firm. "We can't afford to." Her words carried conviction, but inside she wasn't so sure. Doubts gnawed at her constantly. What if the mining rig malfunctioned? What if they discovered them before they were ready? What if, despite all their efforts, humanity simply wasn't strong enough to win? The next morning brought news that shattered whatever fragile peace of mind had managed to find. A scout ship returned with damage to its hull and a grim report. They had attacked a nearby colony, slaughtering thousands in retaliation for suspected rebellion. The message was clear. They were onto something. Called an emergency meeting, her expression dark as storm clouds. They know we're up to something, she told the assembled team, which means we're running out of time. We need to accelerate the timeline. Protests erupted immediately. Accelerate, that's suicide, someone shouted. We'll never finish in time, another added. Slammed her fist on the table, silencing them. Listen to me. If we don't move faster, they will destroy us piece by piece. We have no choice but to take the risk. Reluctantly, the group agreed. Work on the mining rig doubled, with crews operating around the clock. Defense measures were tightened, and supply lines rerouted to avoid detection. Everyone knew the stakes had just gotten higher. In the days that followed, the strain began to show. Tempers flared, mistakes were made, and exhaustion became a constant companion. Yet amidst the chaos, a strange sense of unity emerged. People worked harder, pushed themselves further, driven by the knowledge that failure was not an option. And then disaster struck. A routine test of the mining rig ended in catastrophe when a critical component failed, causing a cascade of malfunctions. The explosion tore through the assembly bay, injuring dozens and setting the project back weeks. Panic threatened to consume the crew, but refused to let despair take hold. We rebuild, she declared, standing amidst the wreckage. We fix this, together. Inspired by her resolve, the team, piece by piece, they repaired the rig, pouring every ounce of effort into making it stronger, better. Slowly but surely, progress resumed. To them, watched from afar, piecing together fragments of intelligence. He still didn't understand the full scope of humanity's plan, but he sensed its significance. Whatever they were building, it posed a threat, one he couldn't ignore. As the final pieces of the mining rig came together, allowed herself a brief moment of optimism. They were close, so close. All they needed was a little more time. But time, as always, was a luxury humanity could ill afford. Part 3. The galaxy was quiet, but the calm felt fragile, like the surface of a frozen lake moments before it cracked. Humanity's resistance forces were running out of time. The quantum mining rig was nearly complete, but every hour that passed brought them closer to discovering their secret. Tension hung thick in the air aboard the Eclipse, where Commander and her crew worked tirelessly to prepare for what lay ahead. Stood on the bridge, staring at the star map displayed on the main screen. It showed the location of the black hole they planned to mine, a swirling abyss of darkness surrounded by streaks of light and violent energy. To most people, it looked like certain death. To humanity, it was their only hope. Final checks are, Lieutenant Sarah reported from her station. The rig is stable, and the transport ships are ready to deploy. Nodded but didn't turn around. Her mind raced with scenarios, each more dangerous than the last. If everything went according to plan, they would extract enough antimatter cores to pay off the debt, and more. But if something went wrong, she pushed the thought aside. There was no room for doubt now. Dr. Isaac Teller approached her, his face pale and drawn. He hadn't slept much in days, and the weight of responsibility was etched into every line on his face. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," he said quietly. "But you should know, one mistake near that black hole and we lose everything." "I know," replied without hesitation, "but we don't have a choice. Either we try or we let them crush us completely." Isaac opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He knew she was right. They had come too far to turn back now. At the edge of human-controlled space, Overseer paced the command deck of his flagship, his sharp mandibles clicking impatiently. Reports from his spies painted a troubling picture: increased ship movements, unusual energy signatures, and rumors of a massive project hidden deep within human territory. Something big was happening, and intended to stop it before it could threaten the hegemony. "Send additional patrols to Sector 7, he ordered his subordinate, "and prepare strike teams. If the humans think they can defy us, they will learn otherwise." Hesitated, glancing at the data scrolling across the screens. "Overseer, our resources are stretched thin. Launching an attack now could leave other regions vulnerable. His eyes narrowed, glowing faintly with anger. "Do not question me. Humans are weak. A show of force will break them quickly." Bowed his head in submission, knowing better than to argue further. Orders were issued, and within hours, a fleet of warships moved toward human borders. The message was clear: resist and suffer the consequences. Back on the Eclipse, alarms blared as sensor arrays detected the incoming fleet. Panic rippled through the crew, but's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Stay focused. This changes nothing. We stick to the plan." She turned to Sarah. "Divert all available power to the shields. Arm the fighters and prepare for combat. We hold them off as long as we can." "Yes, Commander," Sarah replied, her hands flying over the controls. Faced the crew, her expression steely. "Listen to me. They want us scared. They want us to give up, but we won't. Not today. Every second we delay them brings us closer to finishing the rig. That's our mission, no matter what happens." Her words ignited a spark of determination among the crew. Soldiers rushed to their stations, engineers scrambled to reinforce defenses, and pilots climbed into their fighters. The Eclipse wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a symbol of humanity's defiance. As the fleet entered firing range, the battle began. Bright beams of energy lanced through space, striking the Eclipse's shields with devastating force. Explosions rocked the ship, sending crew members sprawling. Smoke filled the corridors and sparks flew from damaged consoles. Despite the chaos, remained calm, barking orders with precision. Target their lead ship, focus fire on their engines. The human fighters swarmed around the vessels, darting and weaving with speed and agility the larger ships couldn't match. Missiles streaked through the void, finding their marks and tearing through enemy hulls. For a moment, it seemed like humanity might hold its ground. But they had numbers on their side. Wave after wave of reinforcements poured into the fray, overwhelming the defenders. Ships exploded in fiery bursts, their crews lost forever. The Eclipse groaned under the strain of repeated impacts, its shields flickering dangerously low. "We can't keep this up much longer," Sarah shouted, her voice tinged with desperation. Gritted her teeth. "Then buy us more time any way you can." In the engineering bay, Isaac and his team worked frantically to stabilize the quantum mining rig. Sweat dripped from their brows as they ran final diagnostics, ensuring every component functioned perfectly. Outside, the sounds of battle echoed through the walls, a grim reminder of the stakes. "It's ready," Isaac announced finally, his voice trembling. "We can launch it now." Received the news over her comm link. "Good work. Deploy the rig immediately." The massive machine detached from the Eclipse and drifted toward the black hole, guided by remote control. Its sleek design gleamed under the distant stars, a marvel of human ingenuity forged in the fires of necessity. As it neared the event horizon, the rig activated, deploying stabilizers to counteract the immense gravitational pull. On the bridge, watched the live feed from the rig's cameras. Streams of antimatter particles began flowing into containment units, glowing with an otherworldly light. Each fragment represented hope, a chance to rewrite humanity's future. But they weren't about to let them succeed. Recognizing the rig's importance, redirected his forces to destroy it. Fighters screamed toward the rig, weapons blazing. Human pilots intercepted them, sacrificing themselves to protect the machine. Explosions lit up the darkness as ships collided and disintegrated. "Shields are failing," Sarah warned, her voice cracking. "We've lost half our fighters." Clenched her fists. "Keep fighting, we're almost there." The rig continued its work, undeterred by the chaos around it. Antimatter cores accumulated steadily, their combined energy surpassing anything humanity had ever produced. With each passing second, the balance of power shifted imperceptibly, but unmistakably, in humanity's favor. Finally, the rig completed its task. A triumphant cheer erupted from the engineering team, though it was short-lived. The fleet regrouped, preparing for one final assault. The Eclipse was battered and broken, its crew exhausted beyond measure. Made a decision. Sarah, plot a course for the rig, we're evacuating. What about the Eclipse? Sarah asked, stunned. It's done its job, replied firmly. Now it's time to finish ours. The crew abandoned ship, boarding smaller transports and fleeing toward the safety of the mining rig. Behind them, the Eclipse drifted helplessly, a ghostly husk surrounded by debris. As the closed in, the rig's automated systems triggered a self-destruct sequence. The explosion engulfed the remaining ships, buying humanity precious seconds. Aboard the mining rig, stared out at the wreckage, her heart heavy with loss but resolute with purpose. They had paid a terrible price, but they had succeeded. The antimatter cores were secure, and the path forward was clear. Humanity had struck back against the not with brute strength, but with courage, ingenuity, and sacrifice. The galaxy wouldn't forget this moment, and neither would the. For the first time in centuries, humanity stood on the brink of freedom. The hardest part was yet to come, but they had proven one thing beyond doubt. They were no longer afraid. Part 4. The mining rig floated silently in the cold void of space, its massive frame illuminated by the faint glow of distant stars. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but focused. Humanity's last hope rested within its walls, in the form of antimatter cores that pulsed with unimaginable energy. Commander stood at the center of the control room, her eyes fixed on the hollow display showing the coordinates for their next destination. Prime, the heart of the hegemony. Knew they were walking into a lion's den. They were ruthless, calculating, and merciless, but she also knew they had no other choice. If humanity wanted to break free from centuries of oppression, they had to confront their tormentors head-on. And this time, they would do it with power, not weakness. Dr. Isaac Teller approached her, his face pale but determined. "The cores are stable," he said quietly. "We can deliver them as planned." Nodded. "Good. Once we reach Prime, we'll present our case and our payment. Let's just hope they listen." Isaac hesitated, then added, "What if they do? What if they attack us instead?" "They won't," replied firmly, though deep down she wasn't entirely sure. "They need those cores too much. They won't risk destroying them or themselves." Meanwhile, aboard his flagship, Overseer seethed with rage. The ambush near the black hole had been a disaster. Dozens of ships lost, countless soldiers dead, and no sign of the mysterious machine the humans had been protecting. It gnawed at him like an open wound. How could such weak, insignificant creatures have outmaneuvered the mighty? "Commander," his voice interrupted his thoughts. "We've received reports of unusual activity near Prime. Human ships, multiple vessels, are approaching the system." His mandibles twitched in irritation. So the humans dared to bring their rebellion to his doorstep. He should have exterminated them when he had the chance. Now, they thought they could challenge him directly. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered coldly. "If the humans want war, they'll get it." Hesitated. "Overseer, perhaps we should investigate first. Attacking without understanding their intentions might provoke unnecessary conflict." Glared at him, his glowing eyes burning with fury. "Do not question me again. Humans are pests. Pests must be crushed." As orders spread throughout the military, preparations began for what promised to be a decisive confrontation. Ships gathered in orbit around Prime, their weapons primed and ready. The planet itself loomed large below, its surface covered in sprawling cities of jagged metal and glowing conduits. This was the seat of the Empire, a monument to their dominance, and now it would become the stage for humanity's defiance. Hours later, the human fleet arrived. Their ships were battered and from the earlier battle, but they flew with purpose. At the forefront was the mining rig, flanked by smaller transports carrying the antimatter cores, stepped forward as communications opened between the two sides. "This is Commander of the United Human Resistance," she announced, her voice steady despite the knot of nerves in her stomach. "We come to settle our debt with interest." There was a long pause before a reply came. On the screen appeared the towering figure of Overseer, his metallic exoskeleton gleaming ominously. His voice was low and rasping, dripping with contempt. "You dare show your faces here after defying the hegemony? You think you can buy your freedom with trinkets?" "These aren't trinkets," shot back, her tone sharp. "These are antimatter cores, enough to pay off every credit you claim we owe plus more. We're ending this farce once and for all." His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. He hadn't expected this. For centuries, they had relied on humanity's inability to fight back. Now it seemed the tables had turned. "You cannot simply waltz into our territory and dictate terms," growled. "You will surrender immediately or face annihilation." Didn't flinch. "Annihilate us and you lose the cores. Without them, your economy collapses, your empire crumbles. Is that really worth it?" For a moment there was silence, stared at her, his glowing eyes unreadable. Then slowly he leaned back in his seat. "Very well, bring the cores, but know this, if you try anything you will regret it." The transmission ended, leaving and her crew alone with their thoughts. They had taken the first step, but the hardest part was yet to come. Delivering the cores meant stepping into the belly of the beast, surrounded by enemies who could crush them at any moment. The human delegation landed on Prime under heavy escort, led the group, flanked by Isaac and a small team of soldiers. The air was thick with tension as they walked through the towering corridors of the command center, their footsteps echoing against the cold, metallic walls. Finally, they reached the main chamber, a cavernous hall filled with officials seated on elevated platforms. At the center stood, his presence dominating the room. Behind him loomed a massive holo display showing the staggering amount of credits humanity supposedly owed. Stepped forward, holding a data pad containing the proof of the fraudulent loan agreement. "Before we proceed," she said loudly, ensuring her voice carried across the chamber, "we want the galaxy to know the truth." Without waiting for permission, she activated the data pad. Instantly, the holo display shifted, revealing documents, transactions, and evidence exposing the scheme. Gasps rippled through the room as the truth came to light. The original loan had been designed to trap humanity in perpetual debt, a deliberate act of economic warfare. "You lied to us," continued, her voice ringing with conviction. "You enslaved us, not because we were weak but because you were afraid of what we might become if given the chance." His mandibles twitched furiously, but he remained silent. Around him, other officials exchanged uneasy glances. Some seemed shocked, others looked guilty. "But we're not asking for revenge," went on. "All we want is fairness. We've brought the antimatter cores to pay off the debt as agreed. Take them and leave us alone, or refuse and watch your empire burn." The room fell deathly quiet. Every eye was on, waiting for his response. For a moment it seemed like he might lash out, ordering his guards to kill the humans where they stood. But then, slowly, he raised a clawed hand. "Very well," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "Give us the cores." Nodded to Isaac, who handed over the containment units. As the antimatter cores were transferred to custody, a strange feeling settled over the chamber. It wasn't victory, exactly, but it was something close. Humanity had faced its oppressors and refused to back down. Later, as the human delegation prepared to leave, called aside. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried a note of grudging respect. "You've proven yourselves clever, human, but remember this. The galaxy is vast, and there are forces far greater than you or I. Your fight is not over." Met his gaze without fear. "Maybe not, but one thing for sure, they won't be the ones to stop us." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving to ponder the implications of what had just happened. The hegemony had been humbled, its grip on the galaxy weakened. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, oppressed civilizations began to stir, inspired by humanity's bold stand. The galaxy trembled, not with fear but with anticipation. Part 5. The human delegation returned to their ships, the weight of what they had accomplished settling heavily on their shoulders. They had faced the hegemony in its own stronghold and emerged victorious, not through brute force, but through courage, ingenuity, and sheer determination. Yet, as Commander stepped aboard the mining rig, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Stood on the bridge, staring out at the vast expanse of stars. The antimatter cores were now in hands, and the debt, all trillions upon trillions of credits, was officially paid. But the truth about the fraudulent loan agreement had been broadcast across the galaxy, exposing this corruption for all to see. The ripple effects of that revelation were already spreading, like cracks forming in a dam ready to burst. "Commander," Lieutenant Sarah said, approaching cautiously, "we're picking up unusual signals from nearby systems. It looks like protests." Frowned protests. Sarah nodded. Colonies under control are rising up. Some are openly rebelling. Others are refusing to pay taxes or follow orders. It's chaos. Felt a flicker of hope. Humanity wasn't alone in its suffering. Countless species had endured this tyranny for centuries, forced into servitude or crushed beneath their iron rule. Now, inspired by humanity's defiance, they were finally fighting back. On Prime, Overseer paced furiously in his private chambers. His sharp mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of his growing frustration. The events of the past hours weighed heavily on him. For the first time in centuries, the hegemony appeared vulnerable, and it was because of those wretched humans. Reports poured in from across the Empire, riots breaking out on occupied planets, supply lines disrupted, alliances crumbling. Even within the ranks there were whispers of dissent. Some officials questioned whether the hegemony's methods had grown too harsh, too unsustainable, dismissed such talk as weakness, but he couldn't ignore the facts. The foundation of their power was shaking. Entered the chamber, his movements hesitant. "Overseer, we have new intelligence. Several species are banding together, forming a coalition against us. They're calling themselves the Free Systems Alliance." Froze, his glowing eyes narrowing dangerously. "What did you say?" "The Free Systems Alliance," repeated, swallowing nervously. "They're led by humans. Commander has become a symbol of resistance. Other races see her as proof that even the smallest, weakest species can stand up to us." Let out a low growl, his claws flexing involuntarily. How could this have happened? Humans, a species he had dismissed as little more than pests, had not only exposed these crimes but also united others in rebellion. This was unacceptable, unthinkable. "We must crush them," snarled. "Destroy every last one of them before they infect the entire galaxy with their madness." Hesitated. "And if we fail, what then, Overseer?" Turned to him, his voice dripping with venom. "Failure is not an option." Meanwhile, aboard the mining rig, watched the galactic news feeds with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Footage showed crowds of alien beings, some, others reptilian, some humanoid, marching in the streets, holding banners and chanting slogans. Their message was clear: enough was enough. This reign of terror would end. Dr. Isaac Teller joined her, his face pale but hopeful. "It's working," he said softly. "They're rising up, all because of what we did." Shook her head. "Not just us. We gave them a spark, but they're the ones keeping the fire alive. This isn't just about humanity anymore. It's about everyone who's ever suffered under the—" Isaac sighed, leaning against the railing. "Do you think we'll win, really win?" Didn't answer right away. She thought about the battles they'd fought, the lives they'd lost, and the sacrifices they'd made. Victory wasn't guaranteed. The road ahead would be long and bloody, filled with challenges they couldn't yet imagine. But one thing was certain: humanity and the galaxy would never go back to the way things were. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "But I do know this. We've shown them that it's possible to fight back, That's something no one can take away. As days turned into weeks, the rebellion grew stronger. Human ships joined forces with vessels from other species, forming a ragtag fleet determined to free the galaxy from oppression. Skirmishes erupted along the borders of controlled space, each battle chipping away at the once mighty empire's dominance. Commander became a legend, her name spoken with reverence among the oppressed. Stories of her bravery spread far and wide, inspiring countless others to join the cause. Leaders of the Free Systems Alliance hailed her as a hero, though herself shied away from the title. To her, it wasn't about glory, it was about justice. In one pivotal engagement, the Allied fleet launched a daring assault on a key stronghold. The battle raged for hours, with both sides taking heavy losses. But in the end, the rebels emerged victorious, capturing the station and securing a strategic foothold in the war effort. It was a turning point, a moment that proved they could be defeated. Overseer watched these developments with mounting despair. His empire was crumbling around him, piece by piece. Allies abandoned him, soldiers deserted, and even his own people began to question his leadership. In a desperate bid to regain control, he ordered a massive counterattack against the rebel forces. But the tide had turned. The fleet, once feared throughout the galaxy, found itself outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The Free Systems Alliance fought with a ferocity born of desperation and hope, pushing the back further and further. Each victory fueled their resolve, until it seemed inevitable that the hegemony would fall. Finally, after months of relentless struggle, the decisive battle arrived. The combined fleets of the Free Systems Alliance confronted the remnants of the military above a barren moon. Explosions lit up the darkness as ships clashed in a chaotic dance of destruction. Antimatter weapons, developed using technology reverse-engineered from the cores humanity had mined, tore through defenses, leveling the playing field once and for all. At the heart of the conflict, Commander led her crew with unshakable determination. Her ship battered and fought valiantly alongside its allies, delivering blow after blow to the enemy. When the dust settled, the fleet lay in ruins, its surviving ships retreating into the void. Watching from the bridge of his flagship realized the truth. It was over. The hegemony, the empire he had sworn to protect, was finished. With a final, bitter growl, he ordered his ship to retreat, disappearing into the depths of space. In the aftermath of the battle, celebrations erupted across the galaxy. Oppressed worlds declared independence, throwing off the chains of rule. Ambassadors from dozens of species gathered to form a new governing body, the Galactic Concordance, dedicated to peace, cooperation, and mutual respect. Commander addressed the assembly, her voice steady and resolute. "Today marks the dawn of a new era," she said. "An era where no race will dominate another, where freedom and dignity belong to all. Let this be our legacy, not conquest but unity." As applause echoed through the chamber, stepped back, allowing others to take the spotlight. Her work here was done. Humanity had proven itself not as conquerors but as liberators. And though the scars of war would linger for generations, the galaxy trembled no longer with fear, but with hope. For the first time in centuries, the future belonged to everyone.